The person I'm cheating with is pregnant with a boy. You're no longer needed, so get out.
It was my husband, Keith, who once vowed eternal love to me, who loudly declared this. At 32, I had been married to Keith for 7 years, dedicating my whole heart and soul for him. I left my job that I really liked to be with Keith when he was relocated for work. I provided him warm meals, a clean home, and a comfortable life, all while continuing to work. And yet I endured the repeated pressures from his parents wanting to see their grandchild, continuing the mentally and physically demanding infertility treatments for 5 years. However, mocking my efforts, Keith was having an affair behind my back. This is unbelievable. I'll be demanding compensation from both of you. During the divorce discussions, both Keith and his affair partner, Tracy, said,
We can't pay compensation. Can we not do the compensation thing? Do you know how old Tracy is? She's 25. Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have financial power yet, so please forgive her. But well, probably because she's young, her eggs must have been fresh. After sleeping together a few times, she got pregnant immediately. It was really efficient.
With Keith saying this, Tracy, looking pleased, chimed in to mock me. That's right. Are you jealous that I got pregnant so easily? Faced with their unbelievable attitudes, my heart was shattered. But I couldn't back down here. No matter what you say, I'll be demanding compensation. The lawyer present explained the measures against them calmly. As we spoke, Tracy became increasingly irritated. Enough! I'm going to the restroom. She suddenly stood up with a visibly annoyed attitude, and at that moment, What's this? Looking at Tracy's lower half, I was speechless. From her white dress, a mysterious liquid dripped and fell. That was, Isn't this strange? You're supposed to be pregnant, right? But you're bleeding? My name is Eileen, 32 years old. I work as a temp at a certain trading company in LA. I met my husband Keith, who is 3 years older than me, at a mixer party and got married when I was 25. Keith is a hard-working salesman at a leading car manufacturer. From the moment we met, I was attracted to him from his interesting conversation and smart demeanor. Luckily, Keith was into me too, and we hit it off right away. Our journey to becoming husband and wife was a breeze. Soon after getting married, Keith was transferred to a regional area on company orders. Though it was a regional area, it was the largest city in the region, with convenient access including a train. Keith is now in charge of a bunch of dealerships in that city that just keeps growing in population. He asked me to quit my job and follow him. I hesitated because I was working at a major publishing house at the time. Having dreamt of becoming an editor since high school and studied literature in college, I was overjoyed when I was hired as an editor at the publishing house. But I also wanted to support Keith, who would be moving to a new place alone, and more importantly, I didn't want to be separated from him during our newlywed period. Also, becoming a mother had been one of my dreams since I was young. At that time, Keith's regional assignment was expected to last at least 5 years. Letting Keith go on his own for 5 years, I would be 30 when he returned. Back then, 30 seemed far off, and I wasn't confident about starting to try for a child at that age. So after much deliberation, I quit my job at the publishing house to follow him on his regional assignment.
I'm glad. If you're coming with me, I feel relieved. Focus on the household for a while and support my life. I'll be stressed in the new environment.
Keith told me this, so I didn't look for work at our new location and focused solely on our home and trying to conceive. However, we struggled to have a child. Out of desperation one night, I timidly suggested to Keith, maybe we should start considering fertility treatments. He glanced at me briefly and sharply said,
Sure, we can try treatment, but use your savings for it.
I was in shock when I first heard that, but there was no way to change it. In the end, I decided to use the savings I had accumulated from working at the publishing house before marriage to pay for visits to a fertility clinic. Keith's cooperation was essential for the fertility treatment. However, no matter how many times I spoke to him, he did not show understanding.
Why should I let some doctor I don't even know dictate our sex life? If two people truly love each other, shouldn't it be enough to conceive a child simply by being intimate whenever they desire? I think you're the reason why we can't seem to do what regular couples do.
Being in a new place with no friends, I believed in him and his words, but they ended up causing me a lot of pain. My period came again this month.
Why can all of my friends' wives get pregnant, but you can't? You've been so neurotic lately, it's bothering me too. Maybe you should shift your focus to something else?
Following Keith's suggestion, I stopped focusing solely on our home life and went back to work. It was a part-time office job at a local small business where my days were filled with making coffee and photocopying. The company was mostly older people, but mentally they were immature, starting to gossip as soon as someone left their seat. I thought about wanting to get pregnant quickly and leave such a company as soon as I joined. Even though I pleaded with Keith and somehow got him to cooperate, trying artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization did not change our situation, and I couldn't get pregnant. In the end, despite the treatment, 5 years passed since our marriage, and I turned 30 without having a child. Eileen, we thought it was good that Keith got such a young and healthy wife, but now you're already 30. I know it's becoming more normal to have a baby when you're older, but don't you think it's a bit slow for someone who tied the knot at 25?
With Keith's income, you're only working part-time, right? You have so much free time, so why can't you show us even one grandchild? We're both working full-time.
Whenever we saw my in-laws, they'd throw shade and straight up insult us for not having any kids. Keith's parents are in their 50s and still in their prime working years. Both high school teachers, they hold a strong belief that becoming a proper adult means continuing to work while having children. So they utterly failed to understand why I, doing easy part-time office work, couldn't get pregnant. But during such times, Keith said nothing and acted as if he was unaware. Because of that, our rides home from his parents' house always ended in fights. I started thinking that maybe we were doomed. That was a year ago when I was 31. A bit later than expected, but Keith was finally able to return to LA.
Eileen, I've been promoted. It's thanks to you for supporting me in an unfamiliar place for 6 years.
Keith, that's great. I'll make something special to celebrate. It was a ray of hope that finally pierced the long-standing gloom in our household. From that day on, it was as if all our past troubles were a lie. We started talking a lot more, had meals at home, and went on dates more often, and even resumed our intimate life that had been put on hold for a while. Wow, what a lovely apartment. You get to live here?
Of course. I rented a nice apartment in LA because you've been through a lot.
Life in LA started off smoothly. I couldn't return to my previous work, but I joined a trading company as a temp, and besides simple office tasks, I was given responsibilities like working on the office newsletter. The people around me were nice, and I could work with more mental freedom than before. With Keith's promotion, he seemed to have a bit more time and began to cooperate more with our efforts to conceive. Maybe, just maybe, we might be able to get pregnant soon. I began to harbor this faint hope. However, about half a year ago, I started to feel suspicious about my husband's behavior. He said his workload had decreased due to delegating more to his subordinates and that his overtime had reduced. But suddenly he started coming home in taxis late at night and going on business trips over the weekend. Then one day, "Hey, Eileen, have you noticed anything different about Keith lately? You see, a while back, Keith came into the store holding hands with a young woman." I heard this from the owner of a small supermarket near the next station. I haven't told Keith, but I sometimes shop at this supermarket, which is a bit far from the nearest station, because they have a wide variety of fresh produce and seasonal fruits are easy to come by. I couldn't believe her words, but considering my husband's recent behavior, it wasn't impossible. When I got home, I decided to try looking through Keith's study. Then, what's this? There was a notebook on the desk, blatantly placed with photos tucked inside. It was a selfie with a young woman. There were 2 photos where they were cheek to cheek, and another where the woman was kissing Keith on the cheek. I could feel the warmth draining from my hands. While my fingertips grew colder, my heart was pounding. I couldn't fully comprehend the betrayal by my husband of 7 years. "Hey, Keith, what's this photo?" When Keith came home that night, I immediately confronted him with the truth. Upon seeing the photo I presented, Keith was momentarily shocked, but quickly started grinning and said,
"Oh, you found out."
Then he uttered unbelievable words.
"The person I'm cheating with is pregnant with a boy. You're no longer needed, so get out."
"What are you talking about? What do you mean?"
"Exactly what I said. I'm telling you to leave. You're useless because you can't get pregnant."
I was shocked by his attitude and words. The shock of the affair was one thing, but to learn that he had also gotten her pregnant. In the words that mocked all my efforts. How is it fair that the one who shouldn't be able to have a baby with my husband gets pregnant without any trouble while I struggled for years? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I packed my bags in tears. This is just unforgivable. More than the sadness of being betrayed by the husband I loved, the feeling of I must absolutely punish my husband and his mistress swelled within me. From that day, I started preparing for divorce. 7 months later, I really wanted to have a discussion with Keith immediately, but he kept dodging it or would snap at me when I tried to talk, so it was difficult to have a proper conversation. After a few months, I decided to leave the house and stay at my parents'. We decided to discuss the divorce with a lawyer involved. Today, we will discuss the divorce between Keith and Eileen. A female lawyer consulted through my father's connections was very supportive and quickly set up a meeting with Keith, but it was unexpected that Tracy, the mistress, would also show up. The meeting started at 10 a.m. on a Saturday in a family restaurant, and Tracy arrived late. I was thinking of officially divorcing Keith and demanding compensation from both Keith and Tracy, but I didn't want to see the face of the pregnant mistress, so I really wished she hadn't come. Yet she arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes late. Sorry, it takes so much time to get ready when you're pregnant. Indeed, her belly was swollen. 8 months. Maybe she was close to her due date. I'll have the pancakes, a club sandwich, and maybe pasta too. Tracy ordered so much food. It was an amount that made me wonder if she had pregnancy cravings. However, based on the size of her belly, the morning sickness phase should be over. Now that we're all here, let's move on to the discussion about the compensation Eileen is demanding from Keith and Tracy. As the lawyer started, Tracy exaggeratedly exclaimed, What? You're demanding compensation from me, who's pregnant? Now that I have to spend more and more money as I'm about to give birth and raise a child? Are you serious? Just because you couldn't get pregnant for years, you're taking it out on me who got pregnant easily? I was stunned by her outrageous statements, yet Keith, sitting next to her, was tuning in with her.
Can we not do the compensation thing? Do you know how old Tracy is? She's 25. Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have financial power yet, so please forgive her. But well, probably because she's young, her eggs must have been fresh. After sleeping together a few times, she got pregnant immediately. It was really efficient.
I felt dizzy at his outrageous statement. Despite the various approaches my lawyer and I tried to take, Keith and Tracy kept up this tone, making no progress. Eventually, Tracy, perhaps frustrated, suddenly stood up and said, Enough! I'm going to the restroom. But at that moment, Hey, there's blood, isn't there? I stared at Tracy's lower half as she stood up. There was clearly something that looked like blood seeping through around the thigh area of her white dress. But she's supposed to be pregnant, so she shouldn't be having her period. Moreover, there was a significant amount of liquid, resembling water, dripping down, indicating something was wrong. What? What's happening? What is this? Tracy immediately panicked. The bleeding suggested something might have happened to the baby. Keith was also frantic, asking,
Tracy, are you okay?
In the end, what was supposed to be a discussion turned into my lawyer and I quickly calling for an ambulance and shoving Tracy and my husband into it. Why am I, the victim, helping the woman he cheated with? I returned to my parents' house, where I was staying, feeling incredibly dismayed. The next day, on Sunday morning, while having breakfast with my family, the doorbell rang immediately.
Eileen, good morning. Oh, mother-in-law, sorry to intrude. Or should I say, I'm home?
As my parents stood dumbfounded at the entrance, Keith walked confidently into the living room.
A funny story, but it turns out Tracy wasn't pregnant after all.
Keith began to explain with a laugh. He met Tracy a few months after he started working in LA. Tracy was a worker at a nightclub frequently visited by Keith's company. Tracy, who claimed to resemble a certain plus-size charisma model, was a bit plump but had glossy white skin, big round eyes, and a friendly personality, making her relatively popular there. One evening after dinner, Tracy leaned on Keith. Flattered by his promotion to LA, Keith was enticed by her soft skin and plump lips and ended up taking her to a hotel. That was the beginning. And then one night, the usually lively Tracy seemed unwell and repeatedly went to the bathroom to throw up.
Tracy, could it be you're pregnant?
At that time, Tracy didn't answer, but a few days later she confessed, I took a pregnancy test and it's positive. Keith was overjoyed at the news. Having moved back to LA, he was closer to his parents, and the pressure from them to show us a grandchild had increased.
If the child is born, I'll just marry Tracy. My parents would be happy too,
he thought excitedly. His misconception and rush escalated further when he found out the child was supposedly a boy. However, Tracy wasn't actually pregnant. Tracy, 25, was looking for a way out of the nightlife. The day she ate too much and threw up, she had slept with Keith, who then mistakenly thought she was pregnant, thinking, I can use this to get married. She continued to eat and gain weight to pretend and be pregnant. The incident yesterday was due to stress urinary incontinence, caused by her obesity pressing on her bladder. The bleeding was because she was actually having her period.
Man, she was a real piece of work. I was so worried she might have had a miscarriage, but to think she wasn't even pregnant. Of course, I've completely broken it off with her.
As he disparaged the deceitful woman, he grabbed my hand, saying,
I misunderstood this time, and I'm sorry. Eileen, let's continue to work on fertility treatments together. We're a couple, after all. Let's forget about the divorce.
The words supposed to be spoken right before me somehow sounded distant. Why had I endured so much for a child with such a man? Looking back, I realized how foolish I was. Instead of getting angry, I just laughed it off.
Eileen, thank you. You're giving us another chance, aren't you?
He seemed to misunderstand my laughter as acceptance of withdrawing the divorce. Overcome with emotion, he attempted to embrace me. However, naturally, I didn't want to be touched by such a vile person and briskly brushed his hand away. For years, I endured being ridiculed and tormented by you and your parents, all while dreaming of having a child with you and bearing the painful infertility treatments. Can you even imagine the excruciating pain of uterosalpingography? You wouldn't understand how I felt every time an artificial insemination, which I begged you for and paid for with my savings, failed. You wouldn't even try to understand, would you? There's no way I could start over with someone like you. Crying, I turned to my worried parents by the door and asked them to kick him out.
Hey, Eileen, wait, listen to me.
My parents, along with my brother and sister who lived nearby and came over worried about me, dragged Keith out of my parents' house. But since that day, Keith has repeatedly stormed my parents' house, insisting on not getting a divorce. Even though I said, I won't talk without a lawyer, he wouldn't listen and would sit in front of the house from the morning of his day off. It wasn't just at my parents' house. He also ambushed me every day after work in front of the trading company where I am so grateful to work.
Hey, Eileen, forgive me.
Like a curse haunting me even when he wasn't physically there, driving me to the brink mentally. After much deliberation, I decided to contact someone. For you to reach out, especially when you refused to speak directly with us about your marriage? Paula and I met after a long time, and Paula was as harsh as ever. However, I felt she was much more reasonable than Keith, so I decided to tell her and Kyle everything. Proud as he is, Keith probably hadn't told his parents.
I thought my mistress was pregnant, so I initiated a divorce, but it turned out to be a lie, so I'm trying to call it off.
As expected, my in-laws were shocked. At first, my in-laws listened with furrowed brows, but gradually their expressions brightened. You want a divorce because you're fed up with Keith. It's regrettable, but honestly, it might not be bad news for us, said Paula.
Right. It's awkward to say, but this time Keith's partner is 25, right? We might actually prefer her over you, Eileen, who has had trouble conceiving.
Despite their wishful thinking, completely ignoring Tracy's lies, I was astounded. But if they could be of help, all the better. Leave it to us. We'll talk to Keith properly. With an unusually bright smile, they sent me off with a box of sweets, and I left my in-laws' house. A few days later...
What's going on, Eileen?
A call came from Keith, who sounded utterly distraught. Despite my insistence on communicating through a lawyer, he found various ways to contact me directly, including using company numbers, friends' smartphones, and even public phones, which was annoying. But this was for a smooth divorce. I tried to remain calm on the phone.
Dad and Mom suddenly started saying I should divorce you. They were all about you having kids just a while ago. What's with this sudden change? It's weird.
Keith was apparently at his parents' house. After listening for a while, the noise changed and someone else spoke on the phone. Sorry, Eileen. This child seems a bit distressed right now. He's not thinking straight. We've talked properly, but if you could speak with him too, he might understand. He's been saying he hasn't been able to talk to you lately. Could you come over now? We prepare the divorce papers. All that's left is for you two to write your names.
Really? Thank you. I'm on my way now. I hurried into a taxi. According to Paula on the phone, Keith was upset but close to being persuaded. They told him that if he didn't divorce me and remarry Tracy, all of their inheritance would be left to his brother. It seems that the warning worked. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Keith looked worn out and had already finished writing the divorce papers. Without even taking off my coat, I approached him as he was hunched over the table and confronted him with my true feelings. Hey, Keith, I really hate you now. I've come to detest you. At my words, Keith's shoulder twitched. Turning slowly, he gave me that cold look I had seen several times during our marriage. I feel the same. I can't stand you, who's just a defective woman who can't get pregnant. And then, in a fit of despair, he threw the divorce papers. Silently, I took the divorce papers, nodded to my in-laws, and left their house. I immediately went to submit the divorce application. Later, at a meeting rearranged with Keith, Tracy, and my lawyer, I reiterated my demand for compensation from both of them. That's absurd. I should be the one asking for compensation for wasting my time with a woman like you.
Paying compensation is really impossible. I've been suffering from mental anguish because of all the stress. I want compensation. As the two of them continued their loud protests, the lawyer, looking exasperated, sighed and informed them that if they continued to refuse paying the compensation, we would have to go to court. This seemed to quiet them down. They quickly agreed to pay the compensation and promised not to contact or approach me in any way. We also prepared a document outlining these terms in case anything happened in the future. Perhaps fearing a lawsuit, they both dutifully paid the agreed-upon compensation by the set deadline. Checking the transfer on my smartphone, I finally felt a sense of relief. Having overstayed my welcome at my parents' home, I decided to move out and start fresh with a new job. As the seasons changed and signs of spring appeared, I felt relieved to begin my new life quietly. However, occasionally, I would receive unsettling emails from Keith attempting reconciliation. No matter how many times I blocked him, he would contact me from new accounts. It seemed I would have to change not just my smartphone, but also my phone number and Messenger ID to completely cut him off. Despite the hassle of data transfer, I decided to change my phone. I forwarded all the emails Keith sent to all our mutual acquaintances, asking them not to share my contact information with him if he asked. Later, I learned that some of Keith's coworkers were among those I sent the emails to, which caused the story to spread within his company. Although his company was aware of our divorce, the revelation that he was sending strange emails to his ex-wife turned him into a laughingstock. Eventually, feeling out of place in the company he had always bragged about being one of America's leading companies, Keith resigned. Half a year into my new life, I received an unexpected call from Paula. Hey, Eileen, you've got to hear this.
Despite changing my phone and blocking Keith by every means possible, I had given my new contact information to Paula in case Keith caused any trouble. This was the first time she had actually reached out. Over the phone, Paula was sobbing. It turned out that, as per their scheme, Keith had quickly remarried Tracy after divorcing me, but after feeling unwelcome at his company, he quit his job and became a freeloader at his parents' house. Tracy, too, had quit her job in the nightlife industry around the time she pretended to be pregnant with Keith's child, expecting to be supported by him, and hadn't worked since. Now, two unemployed individuals were burdening my in-laws. Even if a grandchild was born, they admitted they couldn't possibly take care of them under these circumstances. After a month or two of neither seeking employment, my in-laws were considering evicting them when it was revealed that Tracy was actually pregnant. Oh, is that so? Well, that's good for you, isn't it? Everything turned out as you hoped. As the conversation seemed to drag on, I switched the call to speakerphone and leisurely sipped my coffee while nodding along. However, Paula exclaimed, "It's terrible!" Tracy continues to spend her days indoors fiddling with her smartphone as usual. Since she's pregnant, it's understandable that she can't be tasked with heavy housework, and I had been watching over her, but even the small chores she used to occasionally help with are now met with refusal when asked. When gently cautioned, she hysterically accuses,
"Are you bullying a pregnant woman?"
leading to a continual worsening of the household atmosphere despite the joy of the pregnancy. As for Keith, he uses supporting
Tracy as an excuse not to look for a full-time job, only willing to work short-time, part-time jobs despite once taking pride in his career. He claims he doesn't want to settle for a mediocre company. My in-laws continue to work full-time as teachers. They were supposed to be enjoying their retirement years, looking forward to seeing their grandchildren, but instead, they find themselves exhausted daily from taking care of these adult children, who suddenly refuse to work at all. But after talking to you, Eileen, I feel calmer. I think we've done you wrong. Since we caused you pain, it's only right that I take responsibility for my actions. After a lengthy conversation, she calmed down and thanked me before hanging up. That was the last time I heard from her. A year after divorcing Keith, I've been living peacefully in a new place, slowly healing from the scars of infidelity and divorce, and I've managed to restart my career in publishing, albeit at a much smaller company, enjoying fulfilling days. The sender was the lawyer who had helped me a year ago. Inside the envelope, along with a note saying, "This arrived at our office for you," was a smaller envelope. It contained a letter from Paula. The return address wasn't written. It detailed how my in-laws, Keith and Tracy, were living. Firstly, my in-laws no longer seemed to live in that house. After our phone call, Paula finally decided to kick Keith and Tracy out. They took back the keys, covered the windows from inside like barricades to prevent entry. However, it wasn't that simple.
Mom, are you abandoning me?
If anything happens to the baby because you left a pregnant woman out in the cold, you'll be cursed. As expected, their commotion at the front door led to disapproving glances from neighbors and noise complaints to the police. My in-laws, heartbroken, sold the cherished family home they had spoken so fondly of and fled to a distant place. The letter suggested they were living in the countryside, mentioning the air is fresh here and were growing vegetables. Though they've cut ties with Keith and Tracy, they've kept in touch through Keith's younger brother. Abandoned by his parents and cut off financially, Keith reluctantly rented an apartment nearby and got a full-time job in sales at a small but historic company that supplies screws to large corporations. But Keith, who once thrived as a salesman at a highly renowned car manufacturer, lacks motivation and has a poor attitude in his new role selling mere screws, causing the company difficulty. Tracy, on the other hand, despite safely giving birth, neglects both childcare and household duties, constantly on her smartphone, leaving their home in disarray and leading to constant arguments. One day, Tracy disappeared, taking all of Keith's savings with her, leaving only a signed divorce paper on the desk. The letter from Paula ended with, "I'm truly sorry for everything. Please live happily without any more involvement with my son." Despite our challenging relationship, her words offered me a slight sense of vindication. From what I occasionally hear from friends, Keith seems to be seeking information on reconciling with me. Luckily, everyone in my friend group knows about his bad reputation, so no one's helping him out. And he still has no clue where I am, so I can just enjoy my peaceful life. Reflecting on Paula's letter, I resolved to cherish my current life and move forward positively.